It was a muggy Tuesday morning in August when Marcus Hayes, a newly appointed police chief, stepped out of his modest sedan in the heart of Ridgewood, a small city nestled in the rolling hills of North Carolina. Marcus, a black man in his late 40s, dressed in a simple plaid shirt, worn jeans, and scuffed sneakers, didn't look the part of a man who had spent over 2 decades climbing the ranks of law enforcement. That was entirely by design. Marcus believed in seeing things as they were, not through the polished lens of rehearsed welcomes and formal introductions. As he prepared to lead a department marred by allegations of misconduct and prejudice, he wanted to observe the precinct unfiltered. What better way to gauge its true culture than by blending in as an ordinary citizen? The precinct's parking lot was a hive of activity, with officers coming and going. Marcus scanned the area, taking in the casual banter and occasional side eyes cast in his direction. No one recognized him, which wasn't surprising. His appointment had been announced just days ago, and he'd intentionally delayed his formal introduction. Adjusting the brim of his baseball cap, he took a deep breath, the weight of his mission pressing heavily on his shoulders. He was no stranger to resistance, but he knew this role would test him like never before. Stepping through the precinct's side entrance, Marcus found himself amidst the hum of ringing phones, clattering keyboards, and subdued chatter. The tiled floors reflected the harsh fluorescent lights, and the stale scent of burnt coffee lingered in the air. He moved slowly, observing the dynamics around him. Clusters of officers huddled near desks, some sharing stories, others poring over paperwork. For a moment, he seemed invisible, just another face in the crowd. "Hey, you!" A sharp voice sliced through the noise. Marcus turned to see a white officer striding toward him, his badge glinting under the lights. The nameplate read, "Officer Blake." Behind him, a few others leaned casually against a wall, their expressions ranging from curiosity to amusement. "Lost, are we?" Blake asked, his tone laced with condescension. "This isn't a shelter. You need to take that mess somewhere else." Marcus froze, the words hitting him like a blow. He considered responding immediately, but decided to let the scene play out. Blake stepped closer, his voice rising for the benefit of his audience. "Didn't you hear me?" he sneered. "Get out of here. We don't need people like you hanging around." Laughter erupted from the onlookers as Marcus clenched his jaw. Before he could reply, Blake leaned in, his face inches away, and spat directly at Marcus. Time seemed to slow as Marcus felt the warm saliva hit his cheek. Around him, the laughter grew louder, one officer slapping a desk while another muttered something about showing the riffraff their place. Marcus' pulse pounded in his ears, but he kept his composure. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out a handkerchief and wiped his face with deliberate slowness. "Is this how you treat everyone who walks through these doors?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. Blake smirked. "Only the ones who don't belong here." The group burst into laughter again. Without another word, Marcus turned and walked down the hallway, leaving the officers behind. As he approached the precinct's main office, the intercom crackled to life, summoning all personnel to the briefing room. It was time. The briefing room buzzed with chatter as officers filed in, some carrying coffee mugs, others chuckling over inside jokes. Marcus entered through a side door, now holding a folder stamped with the department's official seal. Standing just out of view, he watched the room fill with familiar faces. At the front of the room, Captain Edwards, a stout man with a graying mustache, called for order. "All right, settle down," Edwards barked. "We've got an important introduction today." The room quieted, curiosity rippling through the ranks. Blake leaned against a wall, his arms crossed, the same smug expression plastered on his face. He looked like a man enjoying his morning. Clearing his throat, Edwards continued, "As most of you know, Chief Peterson retired last month. We've been waiting for his replacement, and I'm pleased to introduce our new leader, a man with an impressive record and a vision for this department." Marcus stepped forward, his footsteps measured and deliberate. The room froze as he approached the podium, his commanding presence silencing even the faintest whispers. Placing the folder on the lectern, he scanned the room, his calm demeanor amplifying the tension. Blake's smirk faltered, the color draining from his face as recognition set in. The other officers exchanged uneasy glances, some whispering, others staring at Marcus with wide eyes. "Good morning," Marcus began, his voice steady. "My name is Marcus Hayes. As of today, I'm your new chief of police." The silence was deafening. Blake's face turned crimson, his earlier bravado evaporating. Marcus' gaze lingered on him for a beat longer than necessary before sweeping across the room. "When I arrived this morning," Marcus continued, "I came in plain clothes because I wanted to see this department as it truly is." What I witnessed was eye-opening. A murmur rippled through the crowd, but Marcus raised a hand, silencing it. "In my brief time here, I've already seen behaviors that are not just unprofessional but downright unacceptable. Let me make one thing clear. The culture that has been allowed to fester here ends today." The room remained eerily still, the weight of his words settling heavily. Blake shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting to the floor. "Respect is not optional," Marcus declared, his tone sharp. "It's the foundation of what we do as law enforcement. Without it, we fail, not just each other, but the community we serve." He let the silence hang, watching as officers squirmed under his gaze. Turning to the rest of the room, he continued, "This morning, some of you laughed at what you thought was just another powerless man being put in his place. Let me remind you, everyone who walks through those doors deserves respect, whether they're wearing a badge or not." His words cut through the room like a blade. No one dared move. Marcus stepped away from the podium, his presence commanding. "Officer Blake," he said, stopping just a few feet from the man. Blake flinched, his earlier swagger replaced by palpable fear. "You," Marcus continued, locking eyes with him, "represent everything that's broken in this department. When you spat in my face, it wasn't just me you disrespected. It was the badge, the oath, and the community we swore to protect." Blake stammered, "Chief, I didn't know." "That's exactly the problem," Marcus interrupted, his voice sharp. "You didn't care to know. You didn't stop to think because you assumed the man standing in front of you didn't matter. That assumption is why this department has lost the trust of the people it serves." The room remained silent, every officer frozen in place. Turning his attention to the rest of the group, Marcus said, "What I witnessed wasn't just one man's mistake. It was a culture where bullying and prejudice are tolerated, even celebrated. That ends now." Returning to the podium, he concluded, "Effective immediately. Officer Blake is suspended pending an internal investigation. For those of you who think this is a slap on the wrist, think again. This is the first of many changes." Gasps rippled through the room. Blake's face turned crimson as he avoided the stares of his peers. Marcus' voice remained firm. "This isn't about punishment. It's about setting a standard. If you're not willing to rise to it, this isn't the place for you. If you're ready to do better, we'll move forward together. But know this, I will hold you accountable every step of the way." As the officers shuffled out, the usual chatter replaced by heavy silence, Marcus remained at the podium, watching as Blake stormed out, his face a mix of embarrassment and anger. Back in his office, Marcus exhaled deeply. He knew this was only the beginning. Change wouldn't come easy, but he hadn't taken this job to make friends. He had come to make a difference, and he was just getting started.